Hello there, it's Max from Isolation Game, and today we moved to sculpting. It's very much on time because I started my own little project called The Return of Space Invader, which you can check in previous videos. And I'm sculpting a lot in this one. So let's dive in.
There's nothing quite like sculpting something from scratch. But you'll need a good grasp of the tools to avoid coming unstuck. So let's get down to it. Maybe Cuthbert will learn something too. Go to the assembly menu. Press the square button to open it if it's closed, and select the modes menu with the X button. Select Sculpt mode with X. Its icon has some 3D shapes on it. Every time you enter Sculpt mode from the modes menu, a new sculpture will be created. You'll also notice that when you're in Sculpt mode, everything outside the sculpture will be blurred and grayed out. This is to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the options menu.
Okay, let's stick with all for now.
When you first enter Sculpt mode, the Shapes menu will open automatically and the Smear Shape tool will be equipped to your imp. Try smearing a shape now by holding R2 and moving your imp around. Now that's out of your system, undo all of it by using the left directional button. By using this tool, we'll help Connie get across the first gap. Move your view a bit closer to the action, looking side on at the space between the platforms. Make sure you can see the platforms and that your imp can reach them. We want to build an organic structure for Connie to walk on, so let's pick an appropriate shape. Select one from the Shapes menu, and you'll see it on the end of your imp. Use the up and down directional buttons to scale it to an appropriate size. While you have a shape on your imp, you can use the grab cam to zoom in and out. Just hold R1 and use the left stick. Now position your imp next to the platform on one side of the gap. Then hold down R2 and use the motion sensor function or the left stick to smear your shape in the gap so that Connie can walk on it. If you want to have another go at it, just undo using the left directional button. Feel free to press and let go of R2 as many times as you want. Each press will create a new edit within your sculpture. Bear in mind that all the edits you make are part of a single sculpture, even if they aren't connected. This means that in assembly mode, they'll behave like a single object. Why not try out different shapes to see what works best? Try holding L2 as you sculpt and use the left and right sticks to rotate the shape. Maybe try making something like a rock formation or a tree trunk. The cool thing is, sculptures are automatically physical, so they can be walked on by puppets like Connie immediately. When you want to try it out, switch to play mode in the options menu and get Connie to walk around on your sculpture.
Really much when I was modeling my ship. That you can
When you're happy to move on, go back to edit mode and proceed to the next step.
L1 and move the shape with the camera. Like, yeah, that's cool. Like strafing. And that's fine. I love this move. I missed it so much when I was modeling the ship. People on Twitch sometimes ask me, why am I doing those tutorials? And someone even laughed for me doing all the things that is given in the tutorial, but when I miss such small control stuff, it makes my other work a little bit more complicated. So that's why I like to know all the details and how they are incorporated inside the overall gameplay and UI. Because actually, it's a miracle they have managed to put everything inside joystick controls. I can imagine it working better in motion controls, but I don't have them, and I don't really want to buy another camera and all that stuff. Maybe later I will buy them, but for today, being able to do everything with my sticks, it's amazing.
What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. When you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group. Have a go at it now. Now we're here, let's try editing the shapes you've already made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in Sculpt mode are the same as in Assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. You can hold L1 and move with R2 to clone your shapes, or scale them with the up and down buttons. You can even repeat clone. But unlike assembly mode, you can't select things with X in sculpt mode. Now try moving, rotating, and scaling your individual shapes.
Great, I didn't know that too.
If you want to smear some more shapes, just go to the Shapes menu and select a shape to sculpt with. Selecting a shape will automatically equip the last sculpting tool you used. Now you can play around at sculpting with different shapes. Don't forget that you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out, you can scope back into your sculpture by hovering over it with your imp and pressing L1 and X. In the next step, I'll show you how to color your sculpture. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default color, but you can sculpt with any color you like. If you're in assembly mode, hover over your sculpture with your imp, then hold L1 and press X to scope back into it. Next, head to the Colors section in the Sculpt menu and press X over a color group to see the different shades. Choose a color, any one you like. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the color you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that color, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also color shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Go to the Sculpt menu and open the Tools section with X. Then select the spray paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint color appear on it. Hold R2 to apply the spray paint to the shapes. You can try out different colors and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. If you want to make it easier to keep your imp on the surface of the sculpture, you can use the Surface Snap guide. You can find Surface Snap in the Sculpt Guides menu. Select it with X to turn it on. There's a Guides menu in every mode, though not all guides are available everywhere. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. The Coat, Style and Effects tutorial has more on finishes if you're curious. By now, you should have an organic looking form, and it will be whatever color your imagination conjured up.
Oh no, dude.
If you switched on
Mine's
Surface
not
Snap,
organic.
switch it off in the Guides menu before continuing. Just select the button with X to turn it off. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step.
Mine is pretty acid, I would say. Now we have to build some kind of road for Connie, because it's pretty much hard to cross anything right now. In this bubble universe of mine. I guess this will help.
All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture, instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to set the tool to subtract. Scope into your sculpture if you haven't already, with L1 and X. When the smear shape tool is equipped to your imp, you can press the triangle button to make it subtract. You'll notice that your imp turns into an outline. The shape on your imp becomes an outline too. You can now use the smear tool to cut into your sculpture. Try using different shapes to see what effect they have. For a really cool effect, try subtracting with a different colored shape on your imp. How good is that? You can switch the tool between add and subtract by pressing the triangle button. Why not play around with the tools a bit and try to make a dramatic or interesting looking form? When you're happy with its shape, go into play mode and see if you can get Connie across it. If you need to edit it, just come back to edit mode via the options menu. Don't forget to scope back into your sculpture using L1 and X. When Connie has successfully crossed the first gap in play mode, switch back to edit mode, then go to the next step.
That's some weird looking stuff we have here. But still crossable.
Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that. So go to the Assembly menu and select Sculpt in the Modes menu. This will create a new sculpture. Now let's practice sculpting an architectural structure over the second gap. To help us build a neater bridge, open the Guides section of the Sculpt menu. In Guides, switch on Grid Snap by pressing X over it.
Oh, we have Grid Snap here also.
You'll see a number appear next to the button. That's how big the grid squares will be. You'll notice the white dotted grid in the scene. The spacing of the dots shows the tightness of the grid. They will change orientation depending on your point of view. We'll leave it on the default setting for now. You can experiment with it later. Now try making a colourful sculpture using the Smear and Move tools and the Colours menu. This'll just be a practice one, so don't spend too long on it. We'll delete it and make an even better one in a minute. You'll notice that it's much easier to keep your shapes neat and straight this time. That's because Grid Snap is active. It makes your tools and objects snap to the grid. It also helps you rotate precisely. Try it out using L2 or the touchpad. With Grid Snap on, objects rotate 45 degrees at a time. You can rotate the shape on the end of your imp before you stamp it, or use the Move tool to rotate shapes that are already placed. When you're comfortable sculpting with Grid Snap, continue to the next step.
That's what I don't really understand how to overcome, is to how can I rotate the shape the way that I want from this position. That would be awesome to be able to do that, because I want it straight, and it's not straight at all, my dear pyramid. And I guess there is no way. to make it look that I want it to look like. So we'll have to choose something else instead. Yeah, this rotation is great. This is also great because it gives me an ability to see the whole range that I need to cover with the tool. And not being able to rotate the object on the current camera angle is a pain. Well, this works.
If we want to make a super neat bridge, there's another guide we can use. If you're still in sculpt mode, scope out of it with L1 and circle. Once you're in assembly mode, delete your sculpture with triangle. Go to the Modes menu. Click the Sculpt Mode button to start a new sculpture. Now we're in Sculpt mode, the Guides menu will have different options. Open the Guides menu and switch on the Mirror Guide. Don't worry about the two additional options. Let's investigate them later. Also, check the Grid Snap is still turned on. Now select the Smear tool in your chosen color and shape. The Mirror Guide will always center on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Now, move your view so you can see all of the second gap, and your imp can reach it. If you need to, use the grab cam to zoom out a little from the shape on your imp. Now stamp your first shape right in the center of the gap to enable the Mirror Guide. Then smear your shape from the center over to the edge of the gap where it meets the platform. You'll see. Now we need to create a bridge across the last gap.
No.
For that, now we need to create a bridge across the last gap. Now we need to create a bridge across. If we want to make a super neat bridge, there's another guide we can use. If you're still in sculpt mode, scope out of it with L1 and circle. Once you're in assembly mode, delete your sculpture with triangle. Go to the Modes menu. Click the Sculpt Mode button to start a new sculpture. Now we're in Sculpt mode, the Guides menu will have different options. Open the Guides menu and switch on the Mirror Guide. Don't worry about the two additional options. Let's investigate them later. Also, check the Grid Snap is still turned on. Now select the Smear tool in your chosen color and shape. The Mirror Guide will always center on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Now, move your view so you can see all of the second gap, and your imp can reach it. If you need to, use the grab cam to zoom out a little from the shape on your imp. Now stamp your first shape right in the center of the gap to enable the Mirror Guide.
Yeah, dude, but
Then smear your shape from the center over to the edge of the
It
gap
doesn't
where
really
it meets
work.
the platform. You'll see that your sculpt is mirrored, so you only have to make half of the bridge, and it'll be nice and symmetrical, leaving you to focus on making it fabulous. Carry on sculpting and carving your bridge until you're happy. Test it in play mode. And when Connie is over the second gap, return to edit mode via the options menu. When you're back in edit mode, switch off the mirror guide. You can also switch off grid snap if you want, before moving on to the next step.
We'll check that later, I guess. Now we need to move Coney.
Now we need to create a bridge across the last gap. For that, we're going to use the mighty Stamp tool. First, we'll need to create a new sculpture by going to Sculpt mode via the Modes menu. Now that you're in Sculpt mode, make sure you've switched off the mirror guide before you continue. You'll be equipped with the Smear Shape tool by default, so you'll need to switch to the Stamp Shape tool. You can find Stamp Shape in the Sculpt mode tools menu, next to Smear Shape. Its icon is a simple square. You can quickly switch between the Stamp and Smear tools using L1 and triangle. Or you can set Stamp Shape to be your default sculpting tool in the My Preferences menu. That way, Stamp Shape will be automatically equipped when you start a new sculpture. Stamping shapes is a bit like stamping objects from the Dreamiverse. With the Stamp Shape tool, you only stamp one shape at a time, no matter how long you hold R2 or X. This has additional benefits too, which you'll see later. Now select the cube in the Shapes menu, then stamp one at the side of the gap. We're almost there, Connie! Open the Sculpt Tools menu again, and this time pick the Stretch tool. Its icon is a double-ended arrow. When Stretch is selected, hovering your imp over a shape will cause an arrow gizmo to appear. Hover over the side of the cube that's facing the opposite platform.
That's cool. I missed
Press
it
and
too.
hold R2 when the arrow is showing, and use your imp to stretch the shape across the gap. Nice. Let go of R2 when you're done stretching. It's not a very exciting bridge right now, but I've got something great to customize it with soon. You can stretch any shape you've sculpted, regardless of what shape it is. Spheres, cones, and even donuts can be stretched. You can even stretch subtracted shapes, but only at the points where they intersect with the sculpture. Have some fun with the stretch tool, but don't go to play mode just yet. When you're ready to take this bridge and your sculpting skills to the next level, continue to the final step. So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. But there's also a way to edit the shape before stamping or smearing. First of all, make sure you're still scoped into the sculpture. If not, hover over the bridge, hold L1 and press X to scope in. Also, make sure that you're using the stamp shape tool and not the smear shape. Next, choose a shape from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu.
I missed something.
The editing bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be and get Connie to Cuthbert. Now we need to create a bridge across the road. Stamp you stretched. You can even stretch subtracted shapes, but only at the points where they intersect with the sculpture. Have some fun with the stretch tool, but don't go to play mode just yet.
No.
When you're ready to take this bridge and your sculpting skills to the next level, continue to the final step. So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. But there's also a way to edit the shape before stamping or smearing. First of all, make sure you're still scoped into the sculpture. If not, hover over the bridge, hold L1 and press X to scope in. Also, make sure that you're using the stamp shape tool and not the smear shape. Next, choose a shape from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one, Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped and not Smear Shape. This is important. Next to the icon, there's a slider and a toggle button. Sliders in the Shape Editor are round, which may seem unusual, but they work just like the sliders in tweak menus. The Blend Amount slider affects how much the shape will blend with other shapes nearby. Try holding X on the slider and moving your imp up and down. This is how you get some truly amazing shapes. The Hard Blend toggle switches between hard and soft blends. Toggle between the two options with X to see the difference it makes. To close the shape editor, just press circle. Now have a play with your blendable shape. You can only blend shapes that are part of the same sculpture. So if you can't see any blending on your shape, scope into the sculpture with L1 and X. You can make some very cool shapes using blending. Try blending subtracted shapes too. Experiment with different shapes and blends on your bridge. Make it really fancy. You can jump back into the shape editor with L1 and square. You can use the shape editor in any of the sculpting tools. Try using soft blend with the spray paint tool. To exit the shape editor and return to sculpting, just press circle. When you've got the hang of the shape editor and you're happy with your bridge, try it out in play mode and get Connie to Cuthbert. Take Connie through the door to finish the tutorial.
Amazing how those tools perfectly work. Because, as I said many times before, L1 and square, yeah? So we'll make it blend. As I said before, in any bigger 3D software, all those operations with polygons are pretty unstable, as I remember it. I'm not wow, this looks cool. I just recently reinstalled Maya and tried some things for my own fun, and they all were still pretty much buggy as hell. And these ones, they just work. That's amazing. Maybe because it's not polygons. Maybe. Okay, thanks for watching. Be a dreamer. Have a good day.